Think of the people you interact with every day. Would you want to spend a day in a canoe with them? I'm Nathan Mercero, and as a financial advisor with over 25 years of experience, I've learned that the quality of the people you spend time with is a lot more valuable than what can show up in a set of financial projections. And growing up in Canada, I discovered you can learn a lot about a person when you spend a day in a canoe with them. So I created this show where I interview people I find interesting and inspiring. I invite you to listen in and learn from their stories so you can create the life you want, one filled with wealth, wisdom, meaning, and purpose. Well, today I'm delighted to spend time with Michael Cole, a true industry leader. Michael manages R360, which is an invitation-only membership organization. He was a former CEO of several wealth management and family offices in our industry, has over 30 years of experience. He's been with Crescent Asset Management. Prior to Crescent, he was the founder of Ascent, Capital Management of US Bank, and before Ascent was the leader in the Family Wealth Group and Family or Wealth Planning Center at Wells Fargo, now Abbott Downing. And prior to that was president of Merrill Lynch Trust. So Michael is known for his thought leadership, has written a book, More Than Money. I'm in the middle of this, Michael. Thank you so much for joining Day in a Canoe. What was your motivation for writing this book, More Than Money?
Nathan, first and foremost, thank you for having me on your podcast today. And it's nice to be with everybody. It was both a professional and personal project. The professional side was that over a 30-year career, I had the opportunity to personally work with and meet with hundreds of families. And in those meetings, I got to learn a lot about what they did well, what they struggled with, what their aspirations were, what their fears were. And I began to see that there was a process and opportunity to really help families to do great things for themselves, for their family members, and for their society by having a more strategic approach to the way they handled wealth. So that was the professional side. The personal side was that growing up, I came from a family of wealth. And when I was about 16 years old, all of that wealth got lost in a matter of months. And it really was a shakening impact to the family. And what was interesting around it was it really ultimately brought me much closer to my siblings. And that's why, the book is titled More Than Money. And the real sort of full concept is wealth is so much more than money. And so when you brought those two things together, and the book kind of wrote itself and became a little bit of my life purpose.
I know that you've seen a number of family conversations, family wealth succession stories unfold. What are the bookends? What are some of the things not to do or things that really create challenges within family wealth succession? And then what are some of the best practices that you've observed?
That's a great question. So, in terms of the things, not to do, what I would say is that a lot of it comes down to really understanding that it's a journey, not an event. And that, oftentimes I get requested to meet with a family and they've been, having challenges, and I find out that they've done sort of zero communication planning. They've never really prepared the next generation. They've never taken a real strategic approach to how they manage the wealth, and they want to sort of fix it in an event. They say, let's get a family meeting together and we're going to fix everything in this family meeting. And the thing that my experience tells me is this is a journey that happens over lifetimes. And the way to really be successful at it, the inverse of your question, would be that it's about realizing that it's a journey with very predictable events along the way, and that if the families that do it well proactively know about those upcoming events and they plan for them. The way I look at it, Nathan, is that, many people that have been successful at building an enterprise, a business enterprise, they go at it where they establish a vision for the business, they have a communication plan, they do role clarification, they do training of future leaders, and they bring that all together. And families don't tend to do that in the family environment. So by taking some of those practices and applying it to family and realizing it's a journey over a lifetime, you end up with much better results.
I know there's differing points of view within the family about wealth. On one hand, the parents, perhaps, who created the wealth feel that they've devoted their life to building a business. They have a sense of love for their family. But then on the other hand, the family members may feel intimidated, or they may feel that they have an expectation that they need to meet or live up to. How do families navigate kind of that range of challenges within the family unit?
So, a couple observations that I would have is I often say to families that I work with is that the matriarch and patriarch cast very big shadows, and what those shadows create is not just spoken expectations, but the more difficult ones are the unspoken expectations. When you think about it, if you are the son or the daughter of a wealth creator who's created significant amounts of wealth, then there's a part of you that looks to that wealth creator and says, how do I ever live up to those expectations? And part of what I think is important is to make a concept that I like, which is a wealth stewardship concept. And the wealth stewardship concept says that if you can make wealth a family experience and train the next generation to be great wealth stewards, and understand they don't have to start from zero. What they have to start from is saying that if you've been successful at creating wealth and you can bring your family and involve them and train them to be good wealth stewards so that they can grow it, they can incrementally build it, and maybe pass it along to the next generation in a good place. So, that's kind of the perspective that I like to take on with families. Oftentimes, you'll meet with somebody and they'll say, well, I don't want to tell my kids anything about the wealth, and I don't want to give them anything because I want them to build it themselves, to have the satisfaction of doing that. And I understand that perspective. But at the same time, oftentimes the key is if you can train them to be good wealth stewards, then they can maybe work with you in collaboration to take the wealth and build it to something that becomes partly their own mission and their own journey.
How have you found families to navigate that? I know that you said it's a journey, but are there consistent or milestone events that help unfold this story? Because it's everyone has an opinion about what this means to them individually within the family, but how do you put the next foot forward and create momentum?
What's very interesting is there are very predictable points along a journey with a family, which, it's amazing that there isn't more planning done to simply lay out those predictable milestones and transitions and to be able to plan for them much more efficiently and effectively. So let me give you a couple examples. So one is what I like to call the coming of age, right? And when you have young family members that come from a family of wealth and they start to get to a point where they're beginning to understand that there's something different about their family. So I'll give you a great example, and I like to tell stories. I had a client I worked with where he was taking his grandson in a carpool and bringing him from school back to home with two other boys. And they get to the grandfather's house, and the grandfather's done very well. He's a multi-millionaire, and he is built huge businesses. And the two boys turn to the grandson when they get to the house and they say, "Wow, you must be really rich," as they looked at the grandfather's house. And the boy was flustered, and he had never been asked that question. He'd never been talked to like that, so he didn't exactly know how to respond. And the next thing that the two boys said is, "What is it that your grandfather does?" And the boy turns to the two boys and says, "He doesn't really do anything at this point." And so it was really never being prepared to deal with this coming at him. And, it was something that we've started with kids that are 5 to 7 years old. We have little games we play that get them to begin to understand the context of wealth, what it means, why it's important, how to be giving back. So, there's one milestone is that first coming of age. Next milestone is that one boy goes off to college and everybody's Googling everybody else. And now his identity begins to be questioned about, do people like me from the family I come from, or do they like me for myself? And so there's another milestone. Then another milestone, he graduates from college. Does he work for the family business? And does the family have family employment practices in place and family, so that there are expectations that are created the right way? There's another milestone. Another milestone is he gets married and brings into new members into the family. And do they believe in prenuptial agreements, and have they had that discussion long enough ahead of time? And then, the next generation comes along. And then the parents begin to realize that it's time for them to move on, or maybe they don't realize that, and the family realizes it. So my point being is that often in these families, you can literally predict and map out the milestones, and good strategic planning plans for the milestones ahead of time, years ahead of time, so they can be successfully transitioned, and the family is preserved, not just the wealth, but the continuity, the love, and the relationships that are built.
And that is vital, because so often we hear stories of money tearing families apart or creating conflict that's just sticks within their ecosystem for years and years. I want to go back to your beginnings. You mentioned that you had a pretty significant change in your personal wealth scenario. And I'm a believer that we're all influenced by our experiences. We have kind of scripts, the way that we see things, or the lens through which we look at the world. How has your script evolved over time, and what was the impact of that early kind of experience
Sure.
around a big shift in your family about the topic of money?
What I realized, in sort of doing, defining my own purpose, Nathan, was that I realized that all of the events and influences of my life led to my purpose, right? And to just, re-clarify, my life purpose to help great families do great things for themselves, their loved ones, and their society, to try to make the world a better place. Okay? And I came to that over, 30 years of sort of finding myself and growing in my career, ups and downs, positives and negatives. When I reflected on where that started, it was really because when I was 15 years of age, I grew up in Westport, Connecticut, in a very affluent community. We lived in a house that had a tennis court, swimming pool, guest house. I was driven to school in a limousine, and at one point, within 2 years from the time I was 15 to the time I was 17, my father was driving a taxi cab in Boston. And that life-changing event really was a sort of moment in time on the family where we were all so shaken, and we found the strengths of each other. And we were able to work as a family unit to preserve ourselves and to maintain those relationships and to hold on to each other through a very difficult identity crisis. And what that made me realize was the fact that family was the core of it. Family was the safety net that allowed me to grow and thrive, allowed my sisters to grow and thrive, allowed my parents to maintain their strength through very difficult times. And so that was the foundation of it. And then every part of my journey began to add to that. I remember meeting with one of my clients very early in my career, and what he was talking about was how he wanted to take his wealth and make an impact on Columbia University. And he began to talk so much more passionately about the impact that he wanted to make as opposed to the money itself. And a light went on with me, and it just said, hey, this is what really people want. What they care about is not just the money, but what the money does, what it can impact. Money in motion. And so that really was, steps along the way that led me to the career that found me, and I found it in my journey.
And as you've worked with families, how has that impact materialized? Like, what are some of the ways? You mentioned the Columbia University. Is there other social impacts or legacy impacts? Like, how do families kind of get their arms around what the possibilities are?
That's a great area for me to go into, and it's something I'm super passionate about. So one of the things that I think is really powerful is to have this concept of fun with a purpose family retreats. And the idea is to say, taking families and putting them into a setting where we're not in anybody's family home. we're in a location where they can expand their horizons and bring together the family and to begin to think like an enterprise. And when you do that, you can have an amazing impact on the way the families think and what they do. I'll give you a great example. I had a family many years ago who was going through a very large liquidity event. And we were planning a family retreat for the family. And the mother said to us that she was worried about her children, who were all adults at this point, becoming armchair philanthropists. And I said, what do you mean by an armchair philanthropist? She said, well, I mean that they sit back and write checks to the ballet and the opera and go to rubber chicken dinners, and that's the way they think they're giving back. She said, I want them to see really the impact that they can have by using their money to improve the world and improve society. So when we went to the family retreat, we did a bunch of different things, but one of the things we did is there were 16 family members there, and we brought them into a room, and we broke them into groups of 4. And they were all sitting there, and they were sort of nuclear members of the family, some spouses, some non-spouses, some children, and we brought in 4 large bicycles. 4 large boxes. And in the boxes were unassembled bicycles. And they each opened the boxes and began to work on assembling these bicycles. And so we walked around the room and we watched them assemble these bicycles, and they were kind of learning from each other and trying to figure it out. And they finished assembling the bicycles, and we had a bike mechanic walk around and check the bikes. And the last thing we asked them to do was put a number on the bike, 1 to 4. And they had 4 assembled bicycles. And I got up in front of the room and I said, why do you think we had you do that? And they said, well, we thought it would be good team building, to do a project together, to learn from each other. And what I said to them was, I said, that was all true, but there was something more. And the something more was the impact you can make when you work as a team. And when I said team, the doors opened up of the room we were in, and 4 kids from the Fresh Air Fund in Los Angeles walked in the room, and they didn't know why they were there. And what we did was we had the family present the first new bike to these 4 kids they'd ever had in their lives. And these kids were just blown away. The family was in tears. The kids were riding their first bikes. They were in tears. And it was a way to get them to see how powerful working together can do to impact things that matter to them. So that's where you can really make a difference. We've done tons of things like that over the years and watched families come together in very unique ways that just delights my heart.
I love that story. Thanks for sharing. And what are you working on now with R360? How is this organization helping fulfill your purpose?
One of the things that I found in sort of being serial CEO of a number of multifamily offices was that one of the things that our clients valued the most was getting together with other like-minded people. And I began to see that year after year after year. And in fact, when I built out Ascent, we even built things like learning labs and family rooms to bring a place for the families to come together and meet. We did something similar in Crescent. We literally built out offices that looked like private clubs so that people could use them to build community. And in doing that, I really began to see the value of community. And then I was approached by somebody that was a former peer-to-peer network chair and said, he had read my book, and he said, I'd love to build something with you. And so that led to the foundation of R360. And R360 is a community, and it's a community of like-minded people who believe in the conceptual design of wealth being more than money, and that they want to manage wealth and manage the impact of wealth to help it to do great things for themselves, their family members, and their society. So it aligns perfectly with my sort of purpose. And the idea is the only thing we have to sell is membership in a community. And what I found is that bringing like-minded people together on a concept where we talk about financial, intellectual, social, human, emotional, and spiritual capital in peer-to-peer meetings, learning from each other, And it has become magical in the ability to share experiences around your children, your spouses, your aspiration, your own life purpose. And it all comes together in this very sort of objective, conflict-free environment where like-minded people get to share with each other.
I love that. Michael, thank you so much for spending time on our podcast today. I know that listeners are going to get just a ton of takeaways. Thanks for all that you do in our industry, and best of luck with R360.
Nathan, thanks for having me. This has been a pleasure. Look forward to talking to you soon.
Thank you for listening and tuning in to Day in a Canoe. We're thrilled to have you as part of our community. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review and share it with your friends and loved ones. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel or follow us on social media platforms by searching Day in a Canoe. We'll see you next time.